Welcome back to my channel. I'm Traben, and welcome to the semifinal round of our manga tournament. We have Blood on the Tracks Volume 3 versus Witch Hat Atelier Volume 3. You know the drill by this point, hopefully. So we're going to go ahead and get into the CAWPILE for Blood on the Tracks. Before jumping in, I do want to say that Volume 3, for some reason, seems to be where everything starts really picking up for a lot of these manga series, and Blood on the Tracks is no exception. I mentioned in the last video how I was waiting to see the mother kind of take off her mask and actually see the menace that has been teased so far, has been alluded to so far in the series, and this does happen in this volume. It does end at a point that makes me very intrigued to follow up. Let's talk about the CAWPILE score. For characters, I gave this a 9 out of 10. I feel like it's doing an excellent job expanding on the characters, and also in this volume in particular, we have the father coming in as well and getting a little bit of development for him, his concern with his family, and the conflict that exists between him and the mother. We also have a little bit more, I'd say, direct characterization of the mom, where we see more and more of the mask slip, as I said before, where you're getting more of this danger whenever she's in the room, whenever she's on screen, whenever she's in a panel. There is an inherent tension to the scene because of these things you've seen her do, because of the way that she talks about her and her son and the family and the way that she views the world. So it's all very interesting character development. For the atmosphere, for the world, I also gave that a 9 out of 10. There are moments in here, much like previous volumes, where there are panels set up in a way that are fairly mundane out of context, but given the scenario, given the setup, they take on this quality of menace. An excellent example would be a particular shot of Seiichi in front of his home. Now, out of context, it doesn't seem like anything unique or interesting, but the way that it's framed with him so small in the picture and the house looming over him, it gives this impression of menace, of his house now being something that is intimidating, point of conflict and of anxiety for him. The stress is manifesting with Seiichi as well, and so the visuals are doing a good job of matching the tension that's being created in the development of the characters and in the continuation of the plot. So it's all working very well together. Writing and art get an 8 out of 10. It still has a few panels that feel off-putting. The attempt at realism with the faces when characters are feeling extreme happiness or extreme sadness, their faces almost seem contorted or alien in some way. I'm not sure if this is an artistic choice or an artistic limitation with trying to go for this realistic look. It works really well with Seiichi and his mom because they are kind of meant to be off-putting and be weird and alien and feel a little bit awkward, but it doesn't resonate, it doesn't work well when you have a character that's genuinely happy about something, and I think the reaction's supposed to be relief or happiness, and it's just, the reaction instead is off-putting and weird. So there are a couple of missteps with that. Other than those particular moments, though, art is still gorgeous, excellent depictions of nature, houses, people. It's all very, it's all going for this fairly realistic portrayal, this realistic grounded style that again is going along with the type of story that is trying to be told within this manga. Plot, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. So in this volume, there are some physical ramifications for Seiichi for the stress that he's feeling and the situation that he finds himself in. There's also a fair amount of realistic development from what's occurred before Seiichi's mother refuses to go to the hospital to visit her nephew, and there is tension being built up there. With Seiichi, like I said, it's manifesting as a stutter, and the paneling, again, the art is working hand in hand with the plot and the characterization to create these moments where you can feel the stress of him trying to form words, trying to get something out. And then when it finally does erupt at the end, it's all very tense as a result of the build-up that's happened over the course of the volume. Intrigue, I'm giving a 10 out of 10. So not only is the end of this volume particularly harrowing and builds upon that tension, but the preview for the next volume actually does a good job of indicating where the story might go to next and how it will expand upon other elements of the story. So we had Fukishi show up a little bit in this volume and talk to Seiichi, discuss some things. She's trying to figure out what's happening. I feel like she's a very empathetic character, and she very quickly figures out that something is not going right at home. And so the next volume teases that she is going to be the subject of like getting pulled into this world and getting wrapped up in this story. And so that's all very interesting. Like I said, that combined with the ending, which has a very tense moment between Seiichi and his mom, it really ramped the intrigue up and really made it to where I wanted to pick up the next volume right away, but I couldn't because I was doing this tournament. Logic and relationships, I put it a 9 out of 10. Nothing in this is comfortable. It's all very it makes me anxious. It's very high anxiety, but it's also very realistic, and I appreciate that. There is depictions of like madness and maybe psychopathy in here that feel more grounded than anything else I've read before or anything recently. So it's not just a character that's like, oh, he's crazy, or like even like it's not a fun crazy. It's not even a like, oh, this villain's totally crazy, he's totally bonkers, who knows what he's going to do. This seems like a very real look at the way that someone can become this twisted character, and at the core of that is the relationship between Seiichi and his mother, particularly the way that she views her son, their relationship, and her life since he's been born, which is a very big point in this particular volume. My overall enjoyment with this is a 9 out of 10. It doesn't quite get to the 10 out of 10 because there were a few points, like I mentioned, with the art that took me out of the story, and it is a very stressful one to get through. This was probably the most dialogue heavy of the volumes so far, so there was quite a bit of talking in this one. I don't feel like the lack of dialogue in the previous volumes was a deterrent for anything, but this really did do a good job of developing the relationships between not only these two, which has kind of been our focus so far, but also with the father and what he's trying to go through, both in trying to understand his wife and also to connect with his son, make sure that he is paying his respects to his cousin. And it's all a very complicated situation where, as an outsider looking in, you have a very clear idea of what should happen, but as someone who is in this group, who is in this situation, those answers might not be as clear. And so it is something that you as a reader can see these problems, these anxieties, these dangers brewing and coming together, because you have the benefit of seeing all sides of the mother and seeing every event that happens, and those outside of that, without that context, are maybe not catching on to what's really going on in the story. So all very wonderful, But again, a little bit too stressful, and there were those few moments that took me out of it. Still an amazing comic, still something I would highly recommend. It is an excellent book, and this one was an amazing entry into the series. So let's see how it stacks up against Witch Hat. So Witch Hat Atelier has mostly been writing on its amazing art. It certainly has a approachable plot, and one that I've said feels very nostalgic for like my late 90s, early 2000s anime fantasy series that I was into. But Volume 3 really comes together and develops the characters in a way that really puts everything together and pushes this to new heights. So let's talk about that. For characters, I'm giving this a 10 out of 10. Characters has kind of been the point here where it's never quite reached the highest peak. This volume, we get a sense of the motivations of all four of the witches. We've explored Coco and Agate in the past. Here we get Tisha's motivations, her worldview, as well as Rika's. And I think part of the reason why it's taken so long for this one to get to that point where we are developing these characters, these side characters, is because we had to spend a lot longer in this particular comic setting up the world building. And I do feel like the mangaka, the author, probably values the world building over the characters. In general, it's very clear in the way that they like lovingly craft the excerpts for the magic items that are inserts into the comic, in the way that the magic system is very robust and well thought out. The world itself is very structured, has a lot of detail going into it. Now that we've gotten the reader acclimated to that world, now we can start talking about how do these characters fit into it. And that's really what this volume was all about, is we've got a good sense of the world building, we've got a good sense of the stakes and like the primary story going on. Let's talk about these other characters and what is driving them. We get Quifri's a little bit of betrayal in this one. He talks early on about how he feels about erasing the minds of people, because that's a very common occurrence, it seems, with the mages. When someone sees too much, you can erase their memories, and he says he only does that as a last resort. And then later in the volume, you see him do it in a way that seems very suspicious. So his drive is very compelling, because it seems counter to what his character has been established to up to this point. It's also this drive against the other witch faction, that secret witch faction, that finally got me on board with this intrigue plot they had going on. I wasn't so much a fan of it early on, but seeing how he compromises his what seems to be his core values and his core beliefs in pursuit of any information regarding them was really intriguing to see. We get a little bit with Olrugio as well, the other lead witch, the other person in the atelier that's like an adult. And it's a very interesting scene where Quifri is arguing with one of the magic police characters, essentially, about like what is the purpose of magic and what is our role. And Olrugio's like, hey, while you guys are having this philosophical conversation, we have actual people down here who need help. Like, he's a very pragmatic character. He's a very caring person, but he's also of the opinion that like, this is what magic is for, so let's actually do it. The other interesting bit here that, again, weaves in that world building with characterization is we get a character who has basically a vision problem. He is not able to discern different colors because he has a fantasy condition where everything has like a silver tint to it. And so we get a good insight, a good arc for him over the course of this volume, a new character. A character that's been introduced before, but one that was a very minor character. And he gets an arc in this one where we are using the world building, we're using magic to help him, which seems core to the ideas of the book. So it was very good to see so much characterization in this one. So Orugio, Quifri, all of the witches, this new character, they all get a good bit of development within this book, and it's all handled in a way that never seems too heavy-handed. There's a little bit of explanation, but it's kind of hand-waved away from the fact that you've got these 4 apprentice witches and they need to know this information. So this teacher is passing on, okay, here's how the test system works, and here's a map, and it's all very makes sense within the world, and it's never too heavy-handed. Going on to atmosphere and setting, I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. I think it's one of the better realized, like, fully fantasy worlds, but because it has so much built up into it, it does have those few moments that seem a little bit overreach, a little bit too much, and so I could see there were parts where I felt like it was a little bit too direct with the world building, and where it felt like that was maybe getting a little bit in the way of other elements, but still excellent. It's an excellent world. It's fully realized. Like I said, it feels very well thought out. It's just it has those occasional hiccups where you do have this direct explanation. And like I said, it's got an in-world reason, but it still has those like explanatory parts where a character is just directly telling you this is the way the world works. Writing and art get a 10. Of course, I will go on record as saying Witch Hat is the most beautiful manga I think I have ever read. In this volume in particular, there were so many things. I was telling my wife, I'm like angry at how good the art is in here, because like, what are these other artists doing? Water effects, the embellishments to the panel edges, the insert map feel of some of the explanations. And then we continue with, anytime we introduce a new item, we have this like lovingly crafted excerpt that looks like it comes out of a guidebook that's put into the comic as well. And you know, this kind of detail is throughout the book. You could take any panel and see just how complicated the shadows are, how complicated the clothing is. Like, you don't normally make clothing with this much like draped and sashes and things, because it's a nightmare to draw and to keep track of. You normally want to keep your character designs very simple, but here we have very complicated character designs. We have very complicated location designs, very detailed, intricate drawings of like minor items, and it's all lovingly crafted. It's amazing. It is, like I said, the best drawn manga I think I've ever read. For plot, I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. I felt like the beginning plot kind of rounded out without too much issue. It seemed like it was going to be a bigger thing than it was, and it was resolved kind of quickly. And then we went into the second half, where Quifri's questionable acts were the most intriguing thing moving forward. Everything in the plot is starting to come together, especially like that. This kind of vague idea of these witches who are in the background and doing things clandestinely. That's still the case, but we're being given more context about what's happening there. How are they trying to interact with with Coco and with this group? And so I felt like the plot was very strong, moved forward at a good pace. This volume felt less like random moving from one plot to the other as previous ones did. There did seem to be some through lines you could trace as the story went forward, and so that was very good to see as well. Intrigue, I'm giving a 10 out of 10. This volume is the one that finally got me into the background plot of what's happening with with these other witches and what is their purpose. At the beginning, I didn't really like that because it seemed like we were a Child of Destiny. We were doing a Child of Destiny thing with Coco, and we were being very vague about it because of seeing the way that Quifrey was so invested in finding out information that he's willing to go against his principles and go against his ideals. That really drew me into that part of the story. There's also a good amount of talk, the background of this formation of the secret witch society, this evil part of society, and then also a good bit of talk about their the forbidden magic that they use and why it's forbidden and what it's able to do were all very intriguing concepts. So I liked it a lot. Logic and relationships, I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. Because we developed the characters so well this volume, we are getting a better sense of the relationships between the characters and the way they view each other, the way they view the world. Because those first couple of volumes had to spend so much time developing this completely fantasy world, we weren't really getting that as much. We had a sense of how characters felt about each other, but not a good sense of why they felt that way. And we're starting to get that now. So that's all very good to see. And then finally, overall enjoyment was a 9 out of 10. Occasionally, like I said, there were those over-explained bits. The plot is getting stronger, and it is definitely like moving from one event to the next is getting a lot more clear with like how they relate to each other. But the overall like form of the story is not very clear. Like what is the goal of what is Coco's ultimate goal? That's not really discussed other than obviously like saving her mom, which there is some development of that in here as well. If you've been counting along at home, you'll know that Blood on the Tracks got 63 as a raw CAWPILE score, which makes it a 9 out of 10. This is a standout comic. It's a standout manga, one of the strongest that we've read, and consistently good throughout the different volumes. So it will get a 5 on Goodreads. It is something I highly recommend. However, Witch Hat scored a 67, which is a 9.57 out of 10. This is the closest to a perfect score as we are probably ever going to get, I would imagine. So, and it's because it has picked up in the few areas where I felt like it wasn't quite reaching the heights that the art was achieving, with character backgrounds being explored, the plot getting a little bit tighter, and the intrigue building. Despite having a 9 out of 10, a 5-star rating, Blood on the Tracks is going to get eliminated, and Witch Hat is going on to the final round of the tournament. Here is what our rankings currently look like. So the winner of Beastars versus Chainsaw Man will be facing up against Witch Hat in our final. I hope to see you there. I hope you are enjoying these videos. I hope you can see that, like, volume to volume, the quality of these stories fluctuates somewhat, right? Had the Blood on the Tracks volume gone up against Witch Hat Volume 2, it would have been a different story. It's the fact that it seems like all of these comics are bringing their A game in Volume 3 and rising to that next level that's making the competition even more fierce. So, again, I hope you join me for the next semifinal round. I hope you join me for the finals. We'll see what am I going to pick up to binge first. But I think it's safe to say that through this process, I've found several comics that I'm going to end up picking up. It's just which one am I going to prioritize first. I hope your reading journey is going well. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you've read any of these comics. If you have anything to add to the discussion that we're having over these comics, please leave those below. And until the next one, take care.